Good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of Prabha Khaitan Foundation, I'm Lopamudra Lahiri, Corporate Programs Advisor for the Foundation. Before I start, would like to share some information about Prabha Khaitan Foundation. It is a non-profit trust founded by the late Dr. Prabha Khaitan in the early 1980s. The foundation is dedicated to socio-cultural welfare and humanitarian causes. It is based out of Calcutta. The foundation promotes performing arts, culture, education, literature, and spreads awareness on gender equality and women's empowerment. It collaborates with caregivers, committed individuals, and like minded institutions to implement cultural, educational, literary, social welfare projects in India. Through corporate programs, we aim to explore and popularize literature, culture, and learning through virtually guided sessions conducted by industry experts from around the globe. Today, we have virtually gathered here for an interesting session called the Dollhouse Project by Ms. Ruchika Nambiar. Ruchika is an Indian artist, writer, and a qualified architect and interior designer. She runs a design consulting practice for brands and businesses, as well as a mentorship program for young artists and designers. Her work ranges across media, from books and graphic memoirs to dioramas and interactive social media stories that can be reached at her Instagram handles, This Ruchika, That Ruchika, and the Dollhouse Project. Today, she will walk us through the intricacies of architecture and design by presenting and showcasing her unique creation, the Dollhouse, the most close to reality installation. Ruchika will talk about her fascination for dioramas, which is inspired by the real life works of miniature artists maverns such as Francis Glassner Lee and Laurie Nix. Her work is interdisciplinary and focuses on finding creative, nonlinear ways to capture and represent experiences through narrative. The Dollhouse Project, a whimsical story set in miniature that follows the life of her 5-inch alter ego, whom she calls Little R. Conceived as an interactive social media narrative, the project finds new ways to have Little R interact with the world and become more real with every passing season and episode. Ruchika will take us through a wide variety of processes that went into this miniaturization, translating plans and architectural drawings into the final miniature house, mimicking textures, recreating furniture in miniature, replicating architectural details like molded panels and herringbone floors, using a combination of laser cutting, 3D printing, and handmade processes to bring this miniature home to life. Today's session is presented by Sri Cement Limited. And now I would request everyone to click the active speaker on screen, mute microphones if they are not already muted. And without any further delay, I welcome today's speaker, Ruchika Nambiar, to take us through her journey into the mini world with her alter ego, Little R. Welcome, Ruchika.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lopa. Thanks very much to the Prabha Khaitan Foundation again for organizing this series of seminars, and to the Academy for having me across these 3 days. So without further ado, let me just share my screen. Okay, so this, I'm basically going to be presenting my latest art project, the Dollhouse Project. But before that, let me just take you quickly through who I am and what I do. I am a 29-year-old artist, designer, and writer based in Bangalore. My practice is very interdisciplinary, and I majored in visual communication design from Srishti Institute of Art Design and Technology. So formally, I'm trained as a graphic designer. After my education, I worked as a research assistant at my college, where I was acting as a project coordinator for Art in Transit, which is a public art lab that creates art and design interventions in and around metro stations in the city. After which I then went on to spend 3 years as a senior interaction designer at Harman International. I worked in their UX strategy team, and I was basically, my work was a mix of branding, marketing, and customer solutioning. After 3 years at Harman, I then went on to establish my own independent practice. And as Lopa mentioned, my work is very interdisciplinary. I basically look at finding new ways to tell stories. And my work takes on a multitude of different forms. For example, The Breadcrumb is a graphic memoir that I wrote and illustrated. It's a coming-of-age story that touches upon themes of individuality and mortality. The Lilliput Proletariat is a public art installation that I created in a metro station here in Bangalore. And it's basically a layered image that tells a dystopian story that critiques ideas around progress and urban development. It's basically fashioned like an aquarium. The illustration is constructed layer by layer to create a 2D diorama. My research work deals in the areas of cultural philosophy, anthropology, media studies. So the book that I'm currently writing deals with how our mind processes experiences, turns them into concepts, how the media we consume informs our understanding of the world around us. And as Lopa also mentioned, I do design consulting for brands and businesses. My work mainly involves a mix of brand strategy and publication design. Apart from that, I also have recently begun the Creative Finishing School, which is a personalized mentorship program for young artists and designers to basically help them figure out their creative trajectory and figure out what kinds of opportunities to angle for and how to shape their practice. And basically shaping their practice in a holistic way over long-term engagement. And then another project that I've recently begun is The Quaver, which is a long-form media critique magazine that basically picks out exemplary pieces of media, whether it's a book or a movie or an episode from a TV show or even a video game, and then publishes detailed long-form critiques on the same. But aside from all that, the project that I'm here to talk to you about today is the Dollhouse Project, which is one of my most recent art projects. It's something that I had conceived of back in 2015, but I've only been able to properly realize it in the last 1 or 2 years. It's an interactive social media story that is set in a miniature parallel reality. And it follows the life of little R, which is my 5-inch tall miniature alter ego, as she makes her way through the trials and tribulations of miniature life. So the making of Little R itself was a process in itself. My face was digitally sculpted based on reference photographs by artist and sculptor Manush John. So he sculpted my face digitally. And then I went ahead and 3D printed that, painted that. That's how the actual miniature alter ego came to be. The project is essentially an experimental storytelling project. It progresses season by season as episodes on Instagram. And I wanted it to be a living, dynamic narrative. So with each episode, it renders the life of this miniature person with more detail and dimension and complexity. And it's basically, it's an experiment in editorializing the everyday, testing the line between reality and fiction. Where does her story overlap with my own reality, and how might my reality get distorted in that process? And in the process of the project, I also end up creating several intersections between her reality and my reality, and drawing in aspects of my life and inserting them into her world. So for example, the actual bag that I carry to work, or the actual slippers that I wear at home, or the cereal that I eat for breakfast, and then how do I recreate all of those little elements and then kind of insert them into her reality, so that we have this continuous intertwining between our two lives. So for example, this is a miniature photo album that I created, which is an exact recreation of my own school photo album, containing all of the same pictures in the same order. So I'm going to show you a quick little demonstration, like a mini tutorial of how this photo album was made. So basically, it's the story is dynamic and it interacts with the real world in a very active way. So, for example, in 2020, I ran a COVID special season where I basically show her life during the pandemic, and I find ways to contextualize the narrative within real life scenarios. What I also like doing is taking it beyond just a physical 3D project and incorporating several digital techniques and to breathe new life into the story, like this, for example.
All alone, my pet?
And another thing that the project lets me do is collaborate with other creators and create like crossover episodes. So for example, this was a collaboration with Cards versus Sanskar, which is basically, it's a card game, which is like the Indianized version of Cards Against Humanity, and created like a little collaborative episode with them where we created a little miniature version of the card game and did a miniature unboxing of it. So throughout 2020, little R spent her time living in a dingy drawer in my study. She was quite frankly tired of it. She had no proper amenities, no plumbing, no proper furniture. She needed to move out. So as a centerpiece of the project, I wanted to build her a house of her own, and I wanted to create an environment where her stories could play out. And thus was born the dollhouse itself. So this is what the entire dollhouse looks like. And it was basically, I wanted to go about it just like how you would build a real home. So I basically worked in collaboration with Studio Slip, which is an architecture and interior design firm here in Bangalore. This is Kamini Rao. She's the founder and creative director of Studio Slip. So she's basically, along with her, we kind of architected and designed the dollhouse just like you would design a real house. And based on my brief, Studio Slip went about the design just like they would for any other client. So they created mood boards for every room. And I didn't want it to be a cutesy dollhouse, so they designed it with a contemporary industrial aesthetic. And they created sketches and elevations. They drew up electrical drawings and spec sheets for all of the furniture. And then based on their designs, I went on to construct the house in miniature over a course of about 8 months. So the main structure was basically constructed out of MDF. So I would plot the pieces digitally, and then I would get them CNC cut. And as you can see here, the house is basically, it's constructed kind of like a movie set. So the house can be taken apart into 4 different pieces. It has removable walls and ceilings. The windows are removable. The furniture is all movable. So it's a very flexible structure. And so that I could, stage scenes in various parts of the house and be able to photograph easily from various angles. And then the structure itself was kind of primed and painted pretty much like a real house. We picked out colors from Asian paints, shade cards, and then we went about painting the house with them. And then we went about picking out each and every piece of furniture for the house. So the advantage of it being a miniature house is there's really no budgetary constraint. We could pick out furniture from Restoration Hardware, from West Elm, Anthropology. We used Jaipur rugs and Jaisalmer flooring. There was really no limit to the possibilities of what we could do in this miniature house. So now I'm going to take you through a quick, like a guided tour of the entire house, and then I will talk you through the various processes that went along in building it. So this was basically the entrance of the house and the foyer. And as you can see, we've tried to include details like the molded wall paneling that you see behind the mirror. And, every piece of furniture was picked out, every accessory, the vase, the little trays underneath, the newspapers, the books, and everything was kind of styled in a very deliberate manner. This is how the foyer came together. And then we move into the ground floor living room. So, for example, as I was mentioning, we had several Jaipur rugs that we used in the house, and we were lucky to be able to kind of collaborate with them and use their rug designs to create several of the rugs in the house. So the rugs were basically, the designs were basically printed onto, UV printed onto cotton fabric and then wrapped around a sheet of foam to give it that slight depth, So this is a top view of the ground floor living room. And as I was mentioning, we picked out every piece of furniture. We picked out real pieces of furniture, and then I went about recreating those in miniature. So these were some of the pieces of furniture that were picked out for the living room. And these were the miniature recreated versions. So for example, upholstery and sofas and things like that were created kind of like how you would create how you would build a real sofa. So the frames were laser cut out of MDF, and then they were, cushioned with sponge and upholstered with fabric, just like a real sofa. And here's another view of the ground floor living room. So I wanted large windows, and I wanted several features like window seats and things like that. So Studio Slip, when they were designing the house, they went about including those kinds of features, as you can see here with this. We have a long window seat that flanks the entire living room. This is another view of the living room. And this is a quick video of how the living room came together. And then we move into the kitchen and dining, which was like an open kitchen concept where this was, one of the reasons collaborating with actual interior designers was so great was because I'm a graphic designer by trade. I'm not an interior designer or an architect. And so while I can design a house adequately, the way that they think about details and colors and textures, and the way they think about how to juxtapose these various elements together is not something that I would have been able to do on my own. So on my own, I would have probably designed a very boring house. But I think collaborating with interior designers and architects was able to push this house to the next level. So in the kitchen, I'm very eclectic in my process of making miniatures. So I use a lot of found objects. I use several, whatever fits in my scale, I find ways to incorporate. So for example, as you can see, all of the cabinet handles and hardware and things like that are all done with jewelry making items, because those really kind of work in my scale. And then you have other details that we incorporated, like the herringbone backsplash. And in fact, all of the items that you see on the island are actually all gifts from various people, like housewarming gifts that are from various people. And then from the kitchen, we move into a little utility area that's kind of semi-outdoors, where I have like a little washing machine and a little sink and a little dustbin. And I'm going to show you a quick tutorial of how this dustbin was made. So on the ground floor, we also have the guest bedroom, which happens to be one of my favorite rooms in the house. And I'm going to show you a quick video of how the guest bedroom came into being. So these were some of the pieces, the furniture pieces that were picked out, the bed, the console table, the wallpaper that were picked out for the guest bedroom. And then I went about recreating those pieces in miniature. So as you can see, here's the same four-poster bed. You can see the console table on the side. The guest bedroom was basically done with, again, within the same industrial theme. So you have the, exposed cement walls, you have the wooden herringbone floors. And another feature that I really like in the guest bedroom is this molded wall paneling that was done on this other wall. And I'm going to show you how this sort of effect was really enjoyable for me to be able to recreate in miniature. And it was basically done by laser cutting very, very thin, delicate frames from MDF and then stacking those frames on top of each other, as you can see here in the video. So it's basically these very thin rectangular frames that are stacked, two frames that are stacked on top of each other to create that molded wall panel effect. And then it was primed and painted like everything else. And that's how, the guest bedroom came to be. And here you can see the wallpaper that was used, that was selected from earlier. And then we have the stairway and the courtyard. So I was very, Studio Slip kind of proposed this idea of having an indoor courtyard. And that was very exciting to me, not just because it would be interesting to have a grassy indoor courtyard in a real house, but also because from an artistic point of view and from a miniature photography point of view, it creates very interesting dynamic visuals to play with. So we had like fake grass that we laid out in that area of the house and created this little indoor courtyard underneath the stairs. And a lot of details and a lot of the textural details were executed via paint alone. So for example, the rammed concrete wall that you see behind the staircase was done, was created with just different painting techniques where, it was a base coat of gray paint and then black paint was sponged onto it and then, splattered on to create that rammed concrete effect. And another aspect that I really like about the house is, despite being a fictional space, I wanted it to be very much rooted in the real world. So I like bringing in elements from the real world. So one example of that is the staircase gallery wall that I created, where we basically collected real plants and leaves and flowers from my garden, from Studio Slip's garden, and basically press dried them over several weeks, framed them all, and then created this gallery wall. So here's a little process of how that framing went about. And then we come to the upstairs living room, which was basically, this is again one of my favorite areas of the house, mainly because of the bright yellow Jaisalmer flooring that we incorporated into it. And this is a top view of the upstairs living room. So as I was saying, furniture was created to mimic real furniture pieces. So for example, this was an armchair we selected from West Elm, and then this was the recreated version in miniature. And all of the furniture was basically created through laser cutting. So I would use the reference images and the measurements from the various furniture websites, scale it down to my scale, create it, create all of the files digitally, then get them laser cut, and then use those laser cut pieces. So I had literally hundreds and hundreds of laser cut pieces that were all very meticulously numbered and cataloged in order for me to keep track of them. And then I would assemble them into the actual furniture pieces. So this is what some of the skeletal pieces looked like before they were painted and upholstered. Right after laser cutting, this is what they look like after assembly. And then in the upstairs living room, we also wanted to incorporate Jaisalmer flooring. So that also was executed via painting entirely. So, painting onto the MDF board with like an orange base coat and then layering various shades of yellow on top of it. And then it was varnished to give it that, that sheen so that it starts looking kind of like marble. So here you can see all of the various kind of textures that we tried to incorporate with the exposed cement walls, the exposed brick walls, the Jaisalmer flooring. And we also incorporated a little study in the upstairs living room, and these little things like the study chair and things like that. A lot of the leather was mimicked using tan-colored Rexine fabric, which is much lighter, and I mean it's like faux leather. But that was all of these. All of the leather pieces that you see in the house were basically done with Rexine. And then we have the master bedroom, where you can see we have a wooden herringbone floor, and a lot of the fabrics in the house, the things like the bedding and the duvets and stuff, we were able to collaborate with and use fabrics from Fab India, from Via Fabrics, which is another fabric brand here in Bangalore. We were able to kind of use little scraps of fabric from them to create all of these little things like the duvet that you see laid out at the foot of the bed and things like that. And here's another view of the master bedroom. And I was very particular about, large windows, window seats. So we were able to incorporate another window seat into the house here in the master bedroom. And then a lot of the textures that you see, like wood, the wooden floors and the tiles, were all basically created entirely through print. So I would design the files digitally on my computer and then get them printed. And then I would basically, as you can see in the video here, I would hand engrave the grooves and the grouting using various embossing tools. So I would basically kind of carve the grooves into the paper like that. So as you can see, we did several versions of tiling. We did these scallop tiles for the bathroom. We did the wooden herringbone floors for both the bedrooms. And then we also have this black subway tile herringbone backsplash for the kitchen. And then this is one of the bathrooms. This is in fact the guest bathroom. And this is my favorite bathroom in the house, mainly because of the little hand painted sink and the colors that we were able to incorporate. So this is a video of the bathroom coming together. And the little sink that you see was in fact 3D printed. The sink and the commode were 3D printed. So I didn't 3D print too many elements in the house, but certain strategic elements were 3D printed so that they have better precision rather than hand making them. So the sink, for example, this is a quick video of the sink being 3D printed. So I have a little desktop 3D printer that I use to, churn these things out. And then the sink was basically hand painted to give it that blue design. And as I was mentioning, I use a lot of jewelry making supplies in my work. So all of the bathroom hardware that you see is all various pieces from jewelry making that I have kind of, cut and manipulated and painted over. And so the towel ring, the faucets, all of these elements. And then we have the balcony. And one of the interesting things, as I was saying, my process is very eclectic. So 5 of the rugs in the house are, designs from Jaipur rugs, but 2 of the rugs are in fact Persian rug style mouse pads. So you get these lovely mouse pads that you can buy on Amazon, which are basically created in the style of Persian rugs. And they fit in my scale. So they were kind of perfect to use in the house. So 2 of the rugs in the house are in fact mouse pads. Another thing that I really like doing is kind of using social media to break the fourth wall and allow people to become a part of the story. So another special aspect of the house is that all of the books that you've seen anywhere in the house are all donated by actual followers of the project. So a while ago, I had run a miniature book drive on Instagram where followers of the project basically sent in suggestions for books that they would like to donate to Little Hours Library. And then some of them also sent in handwritten inscriptions. So they would handwrite their inscription and then scan it and send it to me, or photograph it and send it to me. And then I would basically recreate the book that they suggested in miniature, and then I would scale down and print their inscription really small on the front, on the first page of the book, and then assemble the book with their inscription. So the entire all of the books in the house and all of the books in her bookshelf are all donated to various followers. And another thing that's very special to me about the dollhouse is the art collection, which is filled with real artwork from 15 artists across the world. So I basically reached out to several artists. Some of them are people that I know personally, but some of them are people whose work I follow online, or people whose work I'm a fan of. For example, this piece is very special to me because this is by the British comedian and artist Noel Fielding. I don't know if some of y'all might know him. He's from the fame of The Mighty Boosh, and he's now hosting Bake Off. Anyway, so this piece was actually, in fact, the only piece that I actually purchased and acquired for the dollhouse as if it were a real piece of art. So I acquired this from his art dealer and bought it for the dollhouse. And then all of the other pieces were contributed pro bono by various artists across the world. So in total, there are about 15 artists. This is, for example, a piece by Indian illustrator Vivan Kamath. This is a piece by digital artist Pratik Vatash. So you can see all of the pieces on my Instagram, but basically there's artwork from 15 different artists across the world. So in March 2021, Little R inaugurated and moved into her new home, and I basically celebrated it by hosting a dollhouse warming in my own home. So it was basically it was an exhibition styled styled as a housewarming party, and I basically went as far as sending out miniature invitations to all of my guests. So, there were tiny invitations that were embedded into the actual invitations. And it was interesting to see how people responded to that, because a lot of my guests then pulled out magnifying glasses to then be able to zoom in and read the miniature invitation and post it on their social media. So those kinds of moments of interaction are really quite enjoyable, and part of the reason why I do this project in this way. And I also had miniature food at the event. So a culinarily gifted friend of mine conceptualized this little miniature platter that he then went about creating. So it had like a quail egg or a miniature chiffon cake, which is the yellow thing that you see here, and miniature mimosas and croissants and things like that. So we basically created this miniature food platter that we then welcomed. I was then able to welcome all my guests with. And like I was saying, it was basically it was an exhibition styled like a housewarming party. So people were able to come and look at the various details of the house up close and, be able to talk to me about all of the different processes that went into making it. And here's little R on the day of the housewarming, is standing at her balcony and, greeting all of her guests. And I never wanted the dollhouse to be too pristine a space. I didn't want it to be like some art exhibit that people had to come and they can look, but they can't really touch and they can't get close to. I wanted to be able to pull out various objects from the house, like the books or the tiny photo album, and then be able to show them to people, and people being able to see all of these details up close and being able to kind of interact with the house in a more active way. So really, it was quite an interactive experience for a lot of them, and them being able to kind of, walk around the house, and I'm kind of giving them guided tours. And here I am with Studio Slip. This is the team that worked on the architecture and the interior design of the house. This was quite a momentous day for us. And finally, I was able to send my guests off with, little goodie bags that had miniature giveaways. So I basically, since it was a very unconventional event, I wanted to send them off with rather traditional, giveaways, like a sweet box that you would expect to get at the end of a housewarming. And so I had created these little miniature sweet boxes that I then gave away to all of my guests at the end of the event. And the great thing about the project is people kind of get really involved in the story. So a lot of my guests came with, as I was mentioning, it came with housewarming gifts. So a lot of the items that you see here in the kitchen are actually gifts from various people. So they either buy a miniature object or they commission another miniature artist to create some kind of object for me. So for example, the wooden salad servers that you see in the bowl over there were commissioned by another miniature artist. One of my friends commissioned another miniature artist to create that as a housewarming gift for me. So that's another part of the project that's really special to me. And then I've also had the opportunity to host another event at Studio Slip. We did an open house for their clients and their contacts, and we were able to kind of host a little mini making workshop where people were able to create their own tiny little artwork or tiny books or tiny cushions or planters and things like that. So that was also a nice experience. And as the story progresses, I hope to find new ways to let people become a part of the story and expand this miniature universe, allow them to, maybe write headlines for my mini newspaper, or they can tell Little R what movie to watch every Friday night, or I can invite virtual guests to come and stay in the guest bedroom, and various things like that. So finding ways to kind of, bring people into this world and make them a part of her story. In any case, Little R's story is just beginning, so I'm hoping she gets to travel far and wide and become more real with every passing day. So thank you very much. I'm very happy to have presented again to to students of the Academy here. And I hope you've enjoyed seeing how this project has come together so far. You can follow the story as it continues on Instagram at this Ruchika. You can follow me and my other projects at that Ruchika. Thanks again to the Prabha Khaitan Foundation for organizing, to the Academy for having me. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or listen to any of your comments now.
That was rather interesting, Ruchika. And yes, we have a very interesting question. So what type of glue did you use to put all the tiny bits and pieces together, and especially for the laser cut pieces?
So in fact, you'd be surprised at how well Fevicol works for pretty much anything. For the laser cutting for wood especially, I would use like the carpenter's version of Fevicol. So you get Fevicol SH, which is like the carpenter grade Fevicol that they use for wood projects. And that is what I used for a lot of my laser cut pieces, especially for the larger structural assembly. That was what I used. And for the other, there were certain aspects, like for example, with the upholstery and things like that, it would depend. Like for example, Fevicol could work with certain kinds of material, like say certain types of more absorbent fabric would do fine with Fevicol, whereas things like the Rexine might have needed like super glue in order to bind together and things like that. So I would use, but across the board, it was mainly carpenter grade Fevicol that was that held everything together. So yeah.
There's one more question that has come up. What about the paint and other color supplies?
So we basically went about selecting paint and then buying paint just like you would for a real, if you were building a real house. We selected colors from, like Asian paints, shade cards, and then I would go to a paint shop and buy literal, like the Royal Emulsion paints and primers, and then I would prime all of my boards and wood and things like that, and then paint them with actual rollers. And so really there was no part of the process that did not make me feel like I was on like a construction site. So
okay, somebody is really intrigued by the two-wheeler. How did you make the two-wheeler?
No, I did not make the two-wheeler. The two-wheeler was purchased. In fact, the two-wheeler was my gift to Little R, because as her contractor, I kept her waiting for a very, very long time as she lived in my drawer, and she was waiting for her house during the lockdown. All of the production and construction had come to a pause. So she was waiting for her house for a very long time, and she was very, very annoyed about it. So I bought her the Vespa as a way to kind of get around more easily in the house. So that was bought from there's a miniature, I don't remember the name right now. It's called Scale Arts or something like that, but they create they sell these die-cast miniature vehicles in different scales, and the Vespa was conveniently in my scale, so I bought that.
Okay, now what inspired you to go for the yellow flooring? The yellow flooring that you have used in the living area.
Right.
It's quite a bright and vibrant color. Usually people don't use yellow.
Yeah. So that was quite interesting, because I think I learned a lot about my own preferences in this process, because I think before the project, I had very much more traditional tastes and preferences. But as I kept working with Studio Slip and, they started showing me the various options that were possible and the various references of, this could be a more European or a British style, or this could be like a more, we can incorporate more Indian influences in this design and things like that. When I started seeing the way they were putting various things and textures together, I started finding it way more exciting than my earlier, more conservative traditional choices, and I started seeing that this could be really exciting, not just from an interior standpoint, but also I approached the project very much like an art project. So it's about what's exciting and what's dramatic and cinematic from the perspective of photographing the project, from the perspective of staging scenes in the project. And I was quite happy with how that yellow turned out. I mean, I was quite surprised myself that I ended up going in that direction.
All right. And how much time or months you took to make it? I think you mentioned 8 months, right?
It was over a course of 8 months. I didn't work on it continuously, of course, but it came together over that period. It was also, I mean, the timeline was slightly complicated with various restrictions of the lockdown. My laser cutters and things like that were not always functioning and open. So I had to kind of wait for a lot of those processes. And so bits and pieces kind of came together over an entire course of 8 months.
Process of conceptualization?
Right. So so the construction itself was a process of about 8 months. The design and the conceptualization and finalizing the design happened towards the end of 2019. And then I built it over the course of 2020. So the design and stuff had already been in works for about a year before that itself. And that was when I was still at my job. So, we were kind of working on it at a slower pace. But across 2020, it was pretty continuous.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So would you be able to share names of the brands that you use? You have already done it. Jaipur rugs.
Yes. So a lot of the furniture pieces were inspired by real pieces from brands like West Elm, Restoration Hardware, Anthropology. The rugs, like I mentioned, were all 5 of them were Jaipur rugs. Fabrics, we used several. I mean, some are just kind of locally sourced fabrics, but a lot of the little cushions and bedding and things like that were done with fabrics from Fab India and from Via Fabrics. So it's really just a mix of several different brands that we were lucky to be able to use.
Okay, so before another question, I would like to ask one question that I've been thinking. Quite a tedious process, the whole thing, very detailed, the way you have gone about it. So do you work all by yourself or do you have a team, Ruchika?
So I mostly work by myself. I don't have a team. Occasionally what I do is I hire interns on occasion whenever I feel like I need them in order to divide my work up. Interns that I've hired have not specifically worked on this project, but the thing is, as you've seen, I work on several different types of projects. So then I tend to hire interns who would be interested to work with me, and then kind of give them projects that align with their interests. So for example, if they're interested in animation or if they're interested in publication design, then I kind of let them work on projects of mine that are in alignment with their interests and be able to create something that they can then, put into their own portfolios. So when I need help, I hire interns on demand, but I don't have a fixed team of any sort.
So they're more passionate about what they're going to get involved in.
Yes, definitely. So, and it's also more exciting for me because that way they take better ownership of the work when they are also interested in it. If they get to produce and put together an entire, say, for example, if I want one of my interns created this animated video to promote one of my graphic novel. So she was able to then kind of conceptualize and put together that entire video on her own. And now that becomes a project that she can put in her portfolio, as well as it gives me a video that I can use to promote my book. So it's kind of a win-win for me, and
Wonderful. So Ruchika, what inspired you to get into this miniature form of design?
I think, what started it off was really, I've always been interested in various methods and techniques of storytelling. And in college, I happened to take a diorama making class where we all kind of created our own miniature dioramas. And after that, there was really no looking back because I think I caught the bug of miniature making, and I realized it was such an interesting and powerful medium for telling stories through this format, because people automatically get very immersed into a miniature universe, and the scale alone is enough to kind of draw them in. So then what could you kind of do with that, and how could you kind of tell stories with that? So it's never been about just making miniatures for me. It's always been about what can you say with those miniatures, and what could you do with them.
So the last question before we wind up, is yellow your favorite color?
I understand where the question is coming from, because coincidentally I happen to be wearing a very bright yellow today. But I've never been able to answer this question about what my favorite color is, because I feel like color is such a contextual thing. It always depends on what context it is for. So when it comes to what colors I like to wear, that has a certain answer. When it comes to what colors I like to use in, say, my graphic design work, that has a different answer. So there's really no such thing. I can't really say I have a favorite color to begin with. It really
also mentioned what looks good, when you
yeah,
take.
what looks good, and that's so dependent on context that the answer keeps changing. So
Thank you so much, Ruchika. Every day it's another interesting facets of your presentation that we get to see. So thank you, Ruchika. I'm sure the audience enjoyed the trip to the world of Little R. Every single detail shows the passion with which you undertook this project. Definitely, today's session will make us all, and especially the students of architecture and design, confident that the world of design has endless possibilities if guided by passion and winds of creation under your wings. I take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to our presenter, Sri Cement Limited, Mr. Avneet Alak, Director of the Academy of Applied Arts, who believed in this concept and accepted our invite to conduct this webinar for the students of the Institute. And of course, the audience, the students, and the mentors of the Institute for showing interest and enthusiasm to explore this new concept. And lastly, my team, Mansi and Shriparna, who helped to run this event seamlessly. Thank you so much, Ruchika.
thank you very much for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.